Chapter 9. Exestentionalism. I sat atop a plateau nearly 3 hours out from Night City. My knees were pulled to my chest, my arms wrapped around my legs, and my hands holding the whole tight little package together. I had kept myself busy for months with my work on Meirune's body and the prototype for Arasaka. I had kept myself busy with that work, and then other work like small edits to the MIA brain dances. I tried to force new tedium with Clan Oradum. I needed my mind to stay busy, because something had been nagging at me ever since my drive from Pacifica, after going beyond the Black Wall with Alan. The sun was high and bright, and I could sense the heat that should be baking me like it was scouring the stone around me. The excess heat was simply absorbed, turned into harmless energy which I instinctively tucked away. I stared out across the desert, letting its open emptiness reflect in my mind. Meirune stirred behind me. His footsteps closed in on me. "Merida?" he asked, his voice smooth and baritone, with hardly a hint of electronic reverberation. "It's been hours. You haven't moved. You haven't made a sound. I'm happy to wait here as long as you need. But do you want to tell me what's wrong?" "I'm a monster," I whispered. "What?" His response was more of a laugh than a question. "What are you talking about?" I continued to stare out across the desert. "You know everything about me, Meirune. You know my whole story, who I was, who I became. I accepted back in Thetis that I was set apart from the other fated. The Titan made sure of that. But even then, I still felt normal? Mortal," I corrected him. I knew I wasn't, but at least it felt that way. I understood my scale, but it didn't feel like I was out of place or apart. I went silent for a while, and he let me be in my silence. He didn't push. He didn't ask for more. He did precisely what I needed to do by being patient. I felt the change in the wasteland. Helping Adam, I realized I was being used, not because I was competent enough to do it. It chose me because I was set apart. I died in that explosion with Serena. But I came back. I should have died multiple times, but I didn't. Not until the job was done enough that I wasn't needed anymore. Then in Westeros, I shivered. I tried to keep things simple. I bargained with the deep, but didn't actively use the powers I had on more than a handful of occasions. I could have subjected that entire world had I chose to, alone. But I felt the reality of me creeping into my mind, and I rejected my abilities in lieu of my knowledge. I thought that, perhaps, if I operated the way normal people did, I could still be normal. Or what passes for normal for what we've all been going through. A depressed puff of laughter escaped me. Do you know how many times Alan and Serena told me to just make things happen? I controlled everything: magic, the water, the very fire and light, and the ground beneath everyone's feet. But on the few occasions I tried, I realized that there are rules to what I am. "To what you are?" Meirune said curiously. "What do you mean by that?" I nodded absently. "I'm not me anymore. I'm not human. I'm not a dwarf. I'm not anything remotely mortal anymore. When I was, I could do whatever I wanted so that I could get things done. I simply didn't because I had other methods to accomplish my goals. But now, just thinking about using my abilities to intervene in a way to simply make things easy, I grow nauseous." "You used your abilities quite magnificently in the battle against the dead," Meirune chuckled. I could tell he was trying to keep things light. "I nearly blacked out from the nausea and dizziness," I admitted. I knew I was overriding what should be happening by using my powers to simplify the fight, but I didn't care. I'd just watched Serena burn to death. My emotions got the better of me. "Then, it seems there are exceptions to your rules," Meirune observed. "So it would seem," I sighed as I looked out across the desert sands, wishing I was just as empty as the landscape. "But The thing that made me realize that I'm a monster was when we met beyond the black wall. Whatever I am, the dark net couldn't codify it. It didn't recognize me as a person. I was a living cascade of failing code. A metaphysical place literally bowed around my presence. My being there caused a full packet loss in the real world for miles because the dark net couldn't bear the strain of containing me so much that it leached and crashed the local open net. Mehrunes' silence spoke volumes. The moment I saw that, the creeping feeling did more than creep back in, I explained. It came back like a flood. If my mind simply being within the net did that, if the dark net, could ratify what I am, even when allowed to read my mind freely, if all it could do is create a living construct of failing code and cascading system failures. I sighed and shook my head. I tried to block it out of my mind. I forced myself to stay busy. I worked on your body. I threw myself into the day-to-day activities that demanded my attention. I spent time with Alan and Jessica to keep myself preoccupied. But every quiet moment, every little second that slipped by with nothing to keep the thoughts at bay, they came crashing back in. Finally, I looked back at him. So, do you know what I did? What's that? He asked, his tone curious. I let go, I replied simply. Just last night. I really let myself go, all out. Last night? Mehrunes canted his head to the side. His eyes glowed blue for a moment as he searched through the net for anything that might clue him in on what I'd done. The only anomaly I could find was a bright light coming from Jupiter's location for several moments. What did you do? I destroyed it, I said softly, turning back to look across the desert. There was a long pause as Mehrunes processed the answer. You destroyed what? Jupiter, I replied. I opened a portal to it and just let all my nuclear fire, magic, and stone power in one big burst. I popped it like a balloon. I made a popping sound with my mouth. Of course, I had to do a lot of immediate cleanup. I pulled the planet back together with my geokinesis, I suppose you could call it. But the real work was absorbing all of the light, heat, and radiation from the blast. I let just a minute fraction go through. A minute, Mehrunes gasped and shook his head. Merida, do you understand the amount of energy you would have had to absorb to make that seem like a bright light? I nodded. I did the calculations after looking at satellite photos in the news. I only allowed about 100 quadrillionth of the energy from the blast to reach Earth. Pulling the planet back together still left it radiating heat, though. A colossal amount. I also had to pull its moons back into their relative orbits. They won't be the same, of course, but they'll still stay with it. I also learned that I can control neutrinos as well. Something more continued on after I reabsorbed the light, radiation, and other forms of energy from the blast. I pulled that back as well, though it was awkward for me. A bit of research told me it was the neutrino burst, caused by the explosion. Mehrunes scanned the net and looked at the latest pictures of Jupiter. It looked like a brown ball floating in the void of space. Its weather, the swirling clouds, and spot. They're all gone. Jupiter's a baby again, I agreed. Pulling all back together completely reset its atmospheric layers. The gases and liquids are all mixed together again. It will need to redevelop itself all over again. Mehrunes remained silent. I couldn't blame him. I had let loose with everything except my magic just to see what I had become and destroyed the largest thing in our solar system apart from the sun. And it had been an outburst. A single, frustrated outburst at the realization, frustration, and fear at what I was becoming, or what I was no longer ever going to be. If I could do that with everything except my magic, and my magic dwarfed my other abilities by an unimaginable gulf. In a single outburst, I let out more energy than the sun will in over a century and a half, used it to destroy the planet, then pulled the entire thing back together in a blink, Mayroon. I whispered, my voice shaky at the power I had at my command. I didn't even need to touch a thing. I just willed it to happen. I seemed to know instinctively what to do. All of the research I've been doing into the science behind the elements I can control just simply came to me. There wasn't any thought to it, no threads leading me, no panic or indecision. Just, I'm sorry, Mayroon interrupted. Did you say threads leading you? I cringed. I'd never mentioned the thread to anyone. I was afraid they would think I was losing my mind, seeing a golden thread that led me to correct decisions. Or, worse yet, hate me when I ignored the thread and they suffered for it. How could I justify it to them? I couldn't tell them that my emotions got the better of me, or that I had to experiment doing what it showed me to do, or ignoring it just to see what happened. The thread was another point in the entire problem. If the others weren't seeing one as well, and they had never mentioned that they had, then it was just one more detail that set me apart from them. I see a thread sometimes, I admitted. It's golden and appears in front of me, then leads me to things I should do or interact with. Following the threads gets positive results. And not following it? Mayroon asked after a long pause on my part. Typically, I sighed. People die. Things go out of control. Everything turns out for the worse. Mayroon was quiet, unsure of what to make of that information. Something is leading me through these lives, Mayroon, I said as I squeezed myself tighter. I'm being turned into something else. I'm not the same person I was back in my first life. I'm not even the same Merida from my time in Thedas or the Wasteland. Each life I lose a little bit of my self. I gain power, my mind expands, I became more, but the distance between myself and everyone else around me grows hexationally. See? I yelled as I realized what I had just said. I never would have used the word hexationally. I would have never considered it. I would have used the word exponentially because it was sufficient. But hexationally is 4 tiers along that line of phrasing. Exponentially, tetrationally, pentationally, and hexationally. I could go on, but that's what's most appropriate as far as I can measure. I'm not me anymore, Mayroon. I'm becoming someone or something else, and I can't stop it. I'm losing my personhood. You should talk to the other fated about... No, I shouted fearfully as I looked back at him. I can't. They still think I'm me. They still think I'm more or less like them. If I tell them about what's actually happening to me, what I can actually do if I choose to... You're afraid they won't see you the same way anymore, Mayroon said with understanding. I won't tell anyone. But I think it's a mistake that you don't tell them. They're your friends. They'll want to help. I shook my head. They can't help. They can't stop it. But Alan did me one favor by giving me some advice. I could hear the doubt in Mayroon's voice. You mean when he told you to just try and focus on making money? You're not seriously considering that, are you? No, I replied. He did me the favor of suggesting it. It allowed me to consider how ridiculous it was to squander these lives away by focusing on amassing fortunes I can't bring with me. Instead, I've found that working and focusing on learning helps to keep things at bay for a time. I think part of my purpose is to acquire new knowledge and skills, which is why I seem to be jumping to new worlds and gaining new powers with every life. It's as if I'm being made into something more. So your plan is to say nothing, dive into learning skills and hobbies, and smile like everything is all right? Mayroon asked, skepticism dripping through his tone. I'm not built to be alone, Mayroon. I shivered again. In my first life, I was an introvert who had the one person I needed to allow me to live happily and comfortably. When my spouse died, I was left alone for 2 years and simply fell into a routine of mindless actions, which didn't amount to much of anything. I was a shell, a hollow person. I was so old that the only people who visited me were my children, just to check to see if I was all right and still alive. I shook my head forcefully. I can't do that lifetime over lifetime because the few people I'm going through this with shun me because I'm losing who and what I am. Mayroon's hand rested on my shoulder. I don't think you're losing who you are. You may be changing and becoming something different, but from everything I've seen, you're still the same person. You use your power and influence to make the world better for people. You do what you can to make life easier. It's true that you seem to be growing more intelligent or aware, but your motivations haven't changed. You even balked at Alan's suggestion to be more self-centered. You're still you. You're just becoming something more than you were. Perhaps, I conceded as I leaned into his hand. But I still can't tell them. They can't help. And they would turn it into the only thing that was actually happening to me. Their lives would be ruined working to try and help me when there's nothing to be done. I can't do that to them. You can't just deny that it's happening, either, Mayroon replied. Trying to ignore something like that won't be good for your mind. Then I'll talk to you when I need to talk about it. Fair? I asked as I looked back at him, my eyes pleading with him to agree. Mayroon, something apart from the Fated. I had pulled from the Fallout universe to the Game of Thrones universe, and now he was here in the Cyberpunk universe. Something told me that I still had something to do with him being here. He was a security measure who I could gauge myself with. As he'd aged, he had become far more calm and collected. He had helped to regulate my reactions when I wanted to unleash my powers on people, and also pushed me to show my power at times when I thought discretion was best. He had an excellent sense for those sorts of moments, and I trusted him enough to help steer me through this when I needed support. His expression told me he didn't think this was the best option, but he was willing to concede to my request for now. Very well, but if I think it's becoming too much for you, I reserve the right to speak to the others about it. I pinched my lips together in a pouty display of stubbornness before giving a curt nod. Agreed, but you have to tell me that you're telling them. Fine, Mayroon consented. He sat down next to me and tipped his head to the side, smiling. So, first things first, you said you let it all out in one big outburst. Was that everything you had before you couldn't let loose anymore? I smiled at him, the question bringing out the daring side of me like I knew he would. No, like I said, it was an outburst, one big release, just to see what I could do. How long do you think you could go like that? He asked with a grin, infecting me with excitement of the idea more than the dread of it. I'm not really sure, I mused. Maybe a half hour? Maybe an hour? With your magic? I shook my head. Without it. My magic would basically break all limitations. That's why I use it sparingly. If I used it to go all out, I don't know if I'd ever have to stop or slow down. At least, not in a universe where the magic has fully infused into it. So you went all out in one burst? Not as long as you could? Mayroon clarified. I gave a nod. Something like that. Now you're just bragging, Mayroon grinned, bringing out the puckishness in me. You're the one asking the questions, I protested with a laugh. He had managed to bring me out of my funk, but I knew that the dread would still be there in the quiet hours. So I resigned myself to focusing on my relationship with my friends and keeping busy. This world didn't need a savior or a conqueror. But maybe it could use a good example. Maybe if I just focused on that, I could do more good and keep some more of my personhood.